I watched my wife undress for another man, live from a camera in our home. What I did next didn't just change our marriage, it exposed everything. Dad, it's Mom, said Madison, handing the phone over to her father, Rick. He chuckled softly as he took it from her, already having a hunch about what the conversation was going to be about. Still, it was the first time he'd spoken to his wife that morning, and he was looking forward to hearing her voice. On the other end he heard her familiar warmth. "Hey baby," Julia said. "Think my sweet grizzly bear can handle a dozen college girls today?" Rick grinned. "I'd like to think I'm up for the task. Madison and her crew have been prepping for this for a couple of weeks now, so really I'm just following their lead. They're all 19 or 20, not exactly a group of toddlers running wild." "Did you get the pool set up the way I wanted it?" she asked. I did. Lounge chairs arranged, grill cleaned, bar stocked, and all the food prepped, while you were off having your glamorous trip," he teased. "Next summer you're on chaperone duty." Julia laughed. "Don't act like you're not excited. You'll have a dozen young women in bikinis lounging around all afternoon. I bet by the time I get home, you'll be more than ready for me." Rick smirked. "Let's not forget, one of them is our daughter and 2 others are practically family at this point. I don't need a pool full of college girls to be excited for you. I'm always ready for you. Every day." "I know you are," she said softly. "And I love that about you." He smiled. "How was the trip?" "It was good. Productive. The conference actually had some solid content this time." Julia worked as a senior advisor at a mid-sized investment firm just outside Nashville. She'd been there nearly 6 years and had carved out a solid name for herself. "That's great to hear, sweetheart," Rick replied. "Safe travels back from San Jose." "Thanks. I'll be home later this afternoon. Love you." "Love you too." Madison rolled her eyes in mock exasperation, but deep down she was glad her parents still had that spark. After nearly 25 years together, they were still clearly in love. She could only hope to have something that solid one day. Rick lingered in his thoughts for a moment. Grizzly Bear, Julia's old nickname for him, used to be what she called him before the kids were born. After that he was just Dad until Madison went off to college. Lately the nickname had come back into rotation and he didn't mind it one bit. She always said she loved curling up beside him and sleeping next to her grizzly bear. Who was he to argue? He and Madison, along with her 2 best friends, had been running around non-stop the past couple of days getting ready for the big party. With only 2 weeks left before classes started back up, Madison wanted to throw one last bash before everyone scattered across the region. She was heading into her junior year at Vanderbilt, working toward her degree in medicine. The campus was about 20 miles north, but she and her longtime best friends shared an apartment near campus. Madison, much like her mother, was a charming, curvy young woman, around 5 feet 6 inches, with an easy smile and a ton of energy. Lily and Carrie, her ride-or-die besties, had stayed the night and were already bustling around that morning. Lily especially had kept Rick on his feet the last couple of days. She was tall, slim, and effortlessly beautiful, with smooth pecan-toned skin and thick, flowing curls that bounced with every step. Carrie? Well, he figured he'd be wrangled into moving chairs or inflating floaties by her next. Madison had always been a daddy's girl. She talked me up whenever she had the chance, telling her friends about what a great dad I was. Meanwhile, I was never one for the spotlight, quietly confident in what I could do but not the type to go around boasting. I guess running a small consulting business does that to a guy. You get comfortable in your skin without needing to prove anything to anyone. Not that I cared what other people thought. But Madison knew the fathers of most of the girls coming over that day, and if there'd been some secret vote for best dad, I think she had a pretty good idea of who'd win. Her smile always said as much. Then, out of nowhere, things took a turn. I was standing by the grill when Ricky, some guy who clearly didn't know how to take no for an answer, came storming into the backyard uninvited. Before I had time to say a word, he sucker punched me, caught me right in the gut. The air flew out of my lungs and I doubled over for a second, stunned. Carrie had been near him, and when he hit me, I instinctively let go of her to shield myself. I didn't waste any time after that. Without thinking, I drove my knee into his groin, dropping him to the ground like a sack of bricks. "Get out of my yard," I barked. "You've got no business here." He struggled back onto his feet, red in the face and looking more embarrassed than angry now. "You're not as big as my old man said you were," he muttered. "I'm gonna enjoy knocking you around." He looked ready to throw another punch. I stood my ground. "Just because she tells you she's out of town doesn't mean she always is," he said with this nasty grin. "Sometimes she sticks around so she can enjoy her time with the OL big tool." He sneered, nodding toward himself like he was proud of that line. I clenched my jaw. If you're dead set on insulting my wife, let's take this back behind the house. Or better yet, get lost before you say something you'll regret. I wouldn't believe your lies even if you printed them on paper. Ricky pointed at my hands. We'll see. You'll believe me when I hand you the proof. Whatever. I'd had enough of his garbage. Later, when things had settled a bit, Carrie pulled me aside. Mr. Clark, I'm really sorry. Ricky came here because we went out one time a couple weeks ago, and when he asked me out again I turned him down. I tried to be polite, but he didn't take it well. I think someone posted about the party online and that's how he found out where I'd be. She gave her friends a look. Can you guys please stop sharing every little thing on social media? Then she turned back to me. Also, how'd your nose start bleeding? He never even laid a hand on you. I gave her a sheepish smile. I think that happened when I was trying to block his swing. Took a hit to the face on accident. Might bruise up a bit, but I'll survive. Carrie nodded, still impressed. Mr. C, where'd you learn how to do that? Ricky's a big guy. I know he's been in a few fights and he usually wins. I chuckled, scratching the back of my neck. It's kind of a boring story. You sure you want to hear it? Every girl around the pool, 12 of them in bikinis, nodded eagerly like I was about to read from a thriller novel. Can't say it was a bad audience to have. All right, I shrugged. Back when I was in high school I got picked on here and there for being short. Both of my parents are on the shorter side too, so I knew I wasn't going to outgrow it anytime soon. I've always tried to keep things light, never one to dwell or stir up trouble unless I had to. Sweetheart, I said, glancing over at Madison, do you remember when we took you and Jordan to Paris? He was in 9th grade and you were just starting 7th. She nodded, a soft smile tugging at her lips. Remember that night we drove out to that little Moroccan place? The one in that sketchy part of town. She nodded again and I chuckled at the memory. I told your mom I didn't think it was a good idea to go out there, especially at night. Didn't seem safe to me. But of course she thought I was overreacting. We went back and forth about it for a bit, nothing major, just the usual dance. Eventually I gave in like I usually do. Back then I didn't think too much of it. We arrived, settled in, the food was incredible. Then out of the blue this guy, Bobby, asked Julia to dance. And she said yes. That part stung more than I expected. They only danced a few minutes but I couldn't shake the feeling. Later I spotted Bobby heading to the restroom and without really thinking I followed him in. The guy was one of those types, built, smooth-talking, probably used to getting his way. He smirked when he saw me and started tossing out little jabs. Said he missed Julia and maybe they'd share another dance before the night was over. I wasn't having it. He tried to push past me to leave and instead I pushed back, hard. Put him on the floor before he could say another word. Fast forward to the present, and the mood had changed entirely. Around 10 p.m. after the party the girls started heading out. They hugged me, thanked me for everything, kissed me on the cheek like I was everyone's favorite uncle. It was nice. The cleanup was quick, just a few things to toss out. I was taking the last trash bag to the bins when I heard the garage door open. Julia was home. I stepped out to help her unload and she gave me this look, one of those half-exasperated, half-amused expressions she'd perfected over the years. Oh, come on, Rick, she said. I'm not trying to hurt your feelings, but let's be real here. I stood there for a second, then quietly said, Good night, Julia. Don't pout, baby. I didn't mean it in a bad way, she added, her tone softening a little. But how else was I supposed to take it? She turned to head inside, saying she'd be up after finishing her online class. But when she eventually made her way upstairs, she found the bedroom empty. I wasn't there. I was in the guest room. Rick, she called out, walking toward the door. I didn't answer. Downstairs, she placed her empty wine glass in the sink and called out to me again, but I stayed silent. I wasn't in the mood for another conversation that ended in me feeling smaller than when it started. A few days later, everything came to a head. They think you bruised his kidney, she told me, a look of disbelief on her face. Andrew wants to file charges. I let out a short laugh, more out of frustration than humor. Of course he does. The guy's probably embarrassed that your so-called teddy bear tossed him out like yesterday's garbage. Andrew's furious, she said. Why, Rick? Why did you go after him like that? I looked at her for a moment, my voice steady. Do you really need me to spell it out? I didn't hit that kid just for fun, I told Julia, voice low but firm. I did it because he was grabbing Carrie, our Carrie. The girl we've loved like a second daughter for over 10 years. The same Carrie we used to take on family trips, remember? Julia looked torn, like part of her wanted to believe me but something else, something heavier, was holding her back. "Rick, that's not helping," she muttered, rubbing her temples. "What am I supposed to tell Andrew?" "You tell him that he raised his arrogant son to be a disrespectful little punk," I snapped. "And that Ricky owes both Carrie and me a real apology." Her mouth tightened. "Ricky already told Andrew his side, and it doesn't sound like he did anything wrong." I shook my head, heart sinking. "You actually believe him over me? Seriously, Julia? Has Andrew been slipping you something while you've been away on those business trips?" Her face flushed red with anger at that, and she opened her mouth to shoot something back, probably sharp, but before she could say a word, the rumble of a car engine outside cut through the silence. Julia turned her face toward the sound, lips parted, stunned. I couldn't help but smirk a little, thinking how Ricky was probably still feeling the aftermath of what went down. "Bet that kid's still peeing blood," I said under my breath. But then Julia looked at me and said something I never expected. Something that knocked the breath right out of me. "I don't think you'll be so lucky next time." My head snapped toward her. The look on her face, it wasn't sarcastic, it wasn't flippant. She meant it. She wasn't just worried about some reckless fight, she was genuinely trying to protect me. But the words came out so wrong. The fury came over me like a tidal wave. "When did you stop respecting me, Julia?" I asked quietly, but every syllable carried weight. "When did I stop being a man in your eyes?" She opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, then closed it again. Silence. I could feel it, the fear creeping up, not fear of Ricky or Andrew but fear of what this really meant. Her reaction, those little comments from Ricky and Andrew, the way she'd been acting lately, it all pointed to one awful truth: she might already be too close to Andrew. Too far gone. Maybe that's why I agreed to leave for a while, go on the business trip Brian suggested. Distance might give me time to figure out just how deep she's in, and whether there's still anything left to salvage. Brian and I had agreed, 6 p.m. tomorrow. That was the deadline. If Ricky didn't show up and do the right thing, we were calling the police. No more talking. That night I checked into a hotel. Sat at the little desk by the window with the Braves game playing on the muted TV behind me. I tried to work, but my mind wasn't in it. The hardest part of a fight with your wife? There's no office to escape to. Nowhere to run from that echo in your chest. The next morning I barely touched breakfast. Around lunchtime I finally looked at my phone. 20 messages. Most were long. A few said I was being stubborn. The final one read, "When are you coming? I left you a voicemail. Ricky's coming to apologize at 6. I skipped the others and went straight to the voicemail. Julia's voice was calm but not warm. "Rick, Andrew says Ricky will be there a few minutes before 6 to say sorry. I'm still not okay with how you handled this or the fact that you put me in this position, but we need to handle it like adults. Let's just be done with this." So I showed up. Ricky arrived right on time, just like Andrew promised. Brian was there too, standing off to the side, arms folded. The tension was thick. Ricky walked up to me, hands stuffed in his jacket pockets. "Mr. Clark," he said, voice low and stiff, "I want to apologize for interrupting the party and stepping onto your property without permission." His words came out right, but the look on his face? There wasn't an ounce of genuine regret in his eyes. "I shouldn't have done that," Ricky muttered. "Okay, Ricky," I said, giving him a firm nod. "Thanks for the apology. I think we're done here." He turned toward his car, but not before flashing a smirk, one of those smug, childish grins that made it hard to believe anything that had just come out of his mouth. And then, just as he opened the car door, he looked straight at me and mouthed a word. "Kitty." I stood there, jaw tightening. Every part of me wanted to call him back and set things straight again. But I didn't. I just watched him drive off. Later that day I called Julia. "I hope you're only at the grocery store," she said. I shook my head even though she couldn't see me. "No, I'm in Louisville. My client asked me to come in a couple of days earlier than planned. I'll be here until Friday having lunch with him. Should make it home in time for dinner." There was a pause before I added, with just a little edge in my voice, "Assuming you're not out of town with Andrew again this weekend." That caught her off guard. "What? No. You know I only travel every 6 to 8 weeks. Why would you even say something like that?" I hesitated. "It's nothing. Forget it." But it wasn't nothing. Not to me. Julia might try to cover her tracks now, but I had a gut feeling. If something was really going on between her and Andrew, they'd get sloppy eventually, especially if they thought I was out of town. Andrew struck me as the kind of guy who'd see my absence as an open door. And Julia, she'd seemed more and more pulled into his orbit lately. Maybe I was being paranoid. Or maybe it was time I stopped playing nice and hired a private investigator. I hated that I was even considering it, But this situation didn't feel like something I could trust my heart alone to handle anymore. And then, just when the suspicion had built to a boiling point, we had a night I didn't expect. She met me at the door in heels and a lace set I hadn't seen in years. No words, just action. She pulled me in, kissed me hard, turned me around, and before I knew it, we were tangled together on the couch. Later, she led me upstairs, still holding on like she needed to remind herself, and maybe me, of what we had. Afterwards, she collapsed onto me, her breath still shallow. That was, wow. I needed that. I wrapped my arms around her and said quietly, "I love you, Julia." "I love you too," she whispered. She laid her head on my chest, and for a moment, everything felt right again. And yet, something gnawed at me. I hated that these moments, beautiful and raw, felt like they might be slipping through our fingers. Over breakfast the next morning, she hesitated, then finally spoke. "Rick, we didn't talk about last weekend." I looked up from my coffee. "Are we okay?" she asked, her voice small. I hope you know how much I love you. I want this to work. I have long-term plans for us, for you and me." I studied her face for a second. She looked scared. Vulnerable. I reached across the table, took her hand, and gave her a soft smile. "Me too." But in the back of my mind, I wasn't sure which one of us still meant it the most. "I'd like that too, Julia," I said, though part of me wasn't sure if I believed it anymore. Later that night, a message came through from Brian. It included a link, just a simple blue hyperlink, nothing else. I hesitated before clicking it. The link opened a cloud folder, filled with hours of video, surveillance footage from several cameras inside Andrew's house. It had clearly been set up recently, and it was streaming everything live. I didn't want to look, but I had to know. I clicked on the first video, heart already pounding. And there they were, Julia and Andrew walking into his house like it was just another regular afternoon. I watched in disbelief as Andrew began undressing her right there in the family room. A few moments later, she was bent over his couch, and everything I had feared was happening right in front of me. That was all I could take. I slammed the laptop shut, grabbed my keys, and drove straight to the airport. I didn't even think about packing. I parked in long term and walked into the terminal like a man in a trance. All those late-night doubts, the distance, the odd glances, it had all led to this. And now it wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was proof. Sometime later, another message came through, this one from Julia. I opened it and it was strange, like she was trying to smooth things over with charm. She wrote about how she missed my strength, how she loved the way my shirts looked on her in the morning. She said she always felt safe walking next to me, like no one would dare mess with her when I was around. It was the kind of message she used to send when we were first falling in love. But then it twisted again. "Don't worry, my sweet," she wrote. "You keep taking care of me and I'll keep taking care of you. Though if you can't keep him in line, I might have to say something myself." Made my stomach turn. In another part of the conversation, words clearly meant for Andrew, she told him, "You can do what you want, just not here in my house or when we're traveling. If we're at your place, you can be rough. If we're in my home, be sweet, like my adorable husband." Adorable husband. She had told Andrew I wouldn't be back until next Friday. That thought must have made it seem safe to cross that last line, bringing him into the home we built together. That was a first, and it shook her too. Julia had always drawn that boundary before. "I'm not sure that's a good idea," she told Andrew in one message. "Remember what I said yesterday?" His reply was cold, "You do what I say and everything will work out fine." But then he tried to ease her concern. "If it really bothers you, I won't stay overnight. We'll just have a few long lunches there. That won't raise any alarms." I was done. When I told Brian, he offered to buy me a beer. I nodded and said, "Might take you up on that." He also connected me with Chara Steele, a local family lawyer with a sharp reputation. That night, she started drafting the divorce papers. Later, I saw Julia's car had returned to our house. I was just about to turn in for the night when my phone rang. It was her. "Hey Rick. How's Orlando?" "Hot and humid. Pretty standard for August," I said, keeping my voice calm. "How's Memphis?" She hesitated. "You mean Nashville? I got back this afternoon." I didn't bother correcting myself. At this point, what did it matter? Julia may never be my wife again, that much was certain. But for the sake of our kids, I knew we had to find a way to move forward without burning it all down. Brian had told me earlier, if it makes things easier on them, you can let her save face just a little. I nodded. Yeah. The damage is done. No sense dragging them through more pain. By Monday afternoon, Chara had the divorce papers finalized. I signed them. And still I wondered, was Andrew going to show up at my house again? That night, Julia called again. Said she missed me. Said she loved me. I wanted to believe it. But after everything I'd seen, those words just rang hollow. Still, I didn't hang up right away. I had the upper hand now. And for once, I was going to be the one calling the shots. I sat in my car a block from the house, hidden by the shadows of the trees. Just watching. Waiting. Wondering how far she and Andrew would really go now that she thought I was gone. Rick had been parked down the street for over an hour, silently watching and listening through the Wi-Fi cameras he had discreetly set up in the house. Every movement, every word spoken inside those walls streamed directly to the cloud, and to his phone. Then he heard it. 3 years. That was how long it had been going on. He felt like a fool. Not just for missing it, but for trusting her, for thinking the distance was just life happening. But instead of letting the shame eat at him, he let it harden into something sharper. Anger. He kept listening. Julia made a comment about Andrew being just a bit bigger than him and then laughed. Rick winced. Every man knows what that laugh means. It wasn't just about size, it was about disrespect. But Rick didn't show it. That wasn't the plan. He wanted Andrew angry. Out of control. Because Rick had every intention of making this look like self-defense. Rick stepped into the room, expression unreadable. Julia gasped and tears instantly filled her eyes. Andrew stiffened. Without a word, Rick turned and walked away, ignoring both of them. That's when Julia broke down. She saw Andrew take a step toward Rick and something inside her snapped. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was fear. But she rushed forward, trying to stop Andrew before he did something irreversible. She only managed to grab his arm, stumbling as he pushed past her. Rick was ready. If Andrew tried to spin some false story later or threaten legal action, Rick had the video. He had the footage. He hoped it wouldn't come to that, but he was prepared. Andrew lunged at him, throwing wild punches. Rick dodged easily, backing away, hands raised in a non-threatening stance. Let the cameras show who the aggressor really was. Another flurry of clumsy jabs came flying, and still Rick waited. Patient. Calculating. He wasn't going to strike until it was clear, until no one could question it. Then Andrew charged again, off balance and huffing, his pain already slowing him down. Rick sidestepped, caught his ankle and tripped him cleanly. The man hit the ground with a solid thud, face first on the concrete patio. Inside the house, Julia had finally pulled herself together. She scrambled into a robe and darted downstairs. Her heart was racing as she picked up the phone and called 911. My husband and my boss are fighting in our backyard, she said, voice trembling. I think we need an ambulance. As she moved past Rick's office, something caught her eye. She froze, then ran inside. Out back, Andrew was groaning, still on the ground when the first officer arrived. The cop spotted the darkening bruise around Julia's eye and went to her first. Ma'am, he said gently. Are you okay? She blinked, like the question had snapped her out of a daze. She swallowed and then broke into sobs, pointing at Andrew. He assaulted me. When my husband showed up, Andrew chased him. Rick stood in shock, unsure how to process what he was hearing. Assault? It had been entirely consensual up until now. But her words to the officer were clear and she didn't take them back. The officer turned to her again. Ma'am, you need to go to the hospital so the injuries can be documented. Can your husband take you? Yes, she whispered. Please. You need to go now, the officer instructed. We'll follow with questions later. Back in the car, Julia clutched her hands together, staring out the window, shaking. Rick didn't say anything. He didn't need to. I made a terrible mistake, she finally said, her voice barely audible. We had everything. A beautiful family. A home people envy. Good careers. Rick kept his eyes on the road, jaw tight, mind racing. Her words were a little too late, and yet, hearing her say it made the weight shift just slightly. But forgiveness? That wasn't on the table. Not yet. Maybe not ever. We really did have a good life, Julia said softly, eyes fixed on the passing road. Rick didn't look at her. Yeah, we did. Well, except for your long-hidden appetite for taller, stronger men. Guess I didn't fit the bill. That hit her like a punch to the chest. She looked away, ashamed. And don't tell me you're just realizing all this now, he added. You should have thought about our so-called good life before you decided an affair was worth the risk. I mean, you manage financial portfolios for a living. If anyone understands risk and return, it should be you. I know, she whispered. I was so unbelievably stupid. Rick, can you ever forgive me? He sighed, not angrily, just tired. Maybe someday. But not anytime soon. She didn't reply, and for a moment, silence settled between them. But it didn't last. You know, she said cautiously, Andrew claiming he was assaulted, that might not look great in family court. Rick shot her a look. And what exactly are you trying to say? I'm asking, she said, choosing her words carefully now, how you plan to spin that. And what was with the shotgun? Are you trying to get an innocent man thrown in jail? Rick clenched the steering wheel. I didn't want to send him to jail, he said quietly. I wanted to send him to the morgue. The car fell dead silent. Julia swallowed hard, resisting the urge to open the door and leap out of the moving vehicle. There's nothing innocent about him, she muttered. He took advantage of me. Rick gave her a look of disbelief. Don't you dare. You were just as involved, just as guilty. Julia bit her lip, breathing hard. All you have to say is that I was crying when you got upstairs. You didn't see anything else. That's it. Rick didn't answer. Not right away. Later at the hospital, they were met in the ER by the administrator and a senior legal advisor, both of whom Brian had called ahead. The attorney, it turned out, was a distant cousin of Brian's. Their job was simple: make sure Julia got medical attention, and that no one questioned either of them until legal counsel was present. Once their lawyer arrived, she didn't waste time. She knew what Julia was trying to do: minimize fallout, control the story, and maybe shape the legal narrative before it spun out of control. But the attorney made it clear: documentation came first. Every detail. Every timeline. Meanwhile, Rick sat nearby, arms crossed, stewing. Eventually he said what had been boiling inside him. After what I did to your boyfriend back there, he muttered, you should probably ask yourself what I'm capable of. Julia didn't reply, but her body stiffened. You think that was bad? He went on. Imagine what I could do if I really wanted to burn your whole world down. I got hours of video footage. I could send it to your clients. You know, the people who trust you to manage their money. He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice to a razor's edge. How many of them do you think would be comfortable knowing their advisor sneaks around in married homes with her boss? You think that screams good judgment? She stared at the floor, humiliated. You wouldn't. I might not, Rick replied coldly. But then again, you never thought I'd catch you, did you? Meanwhile, the police report was already circulating. The officer had written it all down: the confrontation at a married woman's house, the scorned husband standing his ground, the wife calling for help, and the intruder claiming injury. There was even a line about the shotgun, how Julia said Rick only brought it to protect himself, not to threaten. The story quickly caught fire. First in the local paper, then on the evening news. It had all the makings of a sensational scandal: betrayal, violence, wealth, and lies. As for Andrew, he had nothing to say. When reporters caught him outside the hospital, face bruised and jaw bandaged, his only response was, "It's a private matter." But behind the scenes, his silence spoke volumes. Multiple surgeries later, his career, and his reputation, would never look the same. And for Rick, the storm had only just begun. Thanks for listening. If this story touched you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below. Have you ever stayed silent when your heart was breaking? Would you have done the same? And hey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We've got more stories to tell. Some messy, some healing, all human. See you in the next one.